Anywho, okay, so first of all, one of my first acquisitions as a result of Gen Con. Okay, so for those of you who do not know what is happening, last week I attended Gen Con. I don't think anybody in this chat doesn't know what's happening. I'm just looking to see who's here. But last week I attended Gen Con, the annual Nerd Fest down in Indianapolis, Indiana. I haven't seen final numbers yet, but I haven't looked, but I think the attendance was something around 75,000 nerds this year from every walk of life. If you don't know what Gen Con is, by the way, Gen Con is an annual gaming and, well, it's gaming, it's anime, it's basically every nerdy hobby under the sun, that kind of a convention. That happens in Indianapolis every year, or at least it has happened in Indianapolis in every year for the last several years. It actually has taken place in several different places, and it originally started in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, hence Gen Con, which is also the birthplace of D&D. Richie is saying I think most of us were there. I don't think everyone was here based on what I'm seeing in the chat. And honestly, this is also going to go up on the YouTubes, so not everyone who is in the chat is everybody who is watching. So I just, but there's a couple of things I wanted to show off. I tried to Periscope a few things, and I just wanted to talk about some of my Gen Con experiences. And also open myself to a Q&A because I did have, I got a lot of questions while I was there. And I did try to do a little bit of Periscoping. I tried out the whole, journalism bullshit thing, which actually got kind of a good response. And I had some interesting new experiences this year at Gen Con, so if you guys are going to have any questions, go right ahead, that's cool. I'm watching the chat, but I'm also just going to talk about some of what went on. And obviously the biggest news for me from Gen Con was the whole Angry GMs, Angry Jupiter crossplay charity bullshit thing, which all started as a joke. So thanks to charity, basically the generosity of my fans, Ali RPG is asking, what are you drinking? This is Kraken Rum and Diet Coke, which was an accidental Gen Con acquisition because my cousins and Sean and Ryan, my cousins, who you know as Gravy 914 and Drum Bum RM, along with Sean's wife, Ms. Too Good for Twitter. I guess it's now Mrs. Too Good for Twitter, now that I come to think about it. But anyway, they accidentally left the remainder of a bottle of Kraken rum here. And they're not coming back through here anytime soon because they're on their way back to New York. So there we go. I've got a rum and coke made with the Kraken. Anywho, so the big news was that my fans ponied up $1,400. The deal was basically for every $200 I raised, I would spend one out of the 3 days of Gen Con, because I really wasn't counting Sunday. 1 out of the 3 days in cosplay as Sailor Jupiter from the old Sailor Moon RPG, not RPG, Sailor Moon anime that I grew up with when I was a kid, and so we raised $1,400, and I think technically I'm still supposed to be in the costume, and it was a really great experience. Amazon Mandy, she helped me out with the boots, which was probably the hardest part. So I did spend the entirety of Gen Con walking around in 2.5-inch heeled boots, which in itself was quite an adventure. And Mrs. Too Good for Twitter, she's still Ms. Too Good for Twitter. That's how she's listed on Twitter. She did the makeup, and she helped me with the hair because I had a wig, and she was a big help to everything. So she was actually really amazing. And I actually participated in the crossplay contest, and I have never done any sort of cosplay at all, and I didn't even realize that crossplay and gender bending were like separate genres of cosplay. So from what I've learned, cosplay is showing up to the convention dressed as a particular character. Gender bending is when you show up as an alternate sex version of your character. So if you decided to dress, like if you're a woman and you decided to dress as a say, a female Spider-Man and create your own original Spider-Man costume based on what you think Spider-Man would look like as a girl. Though I don't think that's, like, a good example because Spider-Man is a girl now, maybe. I don't know what the hell's going on with Marvel because Marvel has lost its fucking mind. But anyway, if you were to decide to, like, say, let's say you were to reimagine the Mario Brothers as the Mario Sisters and create these costumes, that would be gender bending. And then crossplay is where you, a male, dress up as a female character, or you, a female, dress up as a male character, which is what I was doing. And apparently there is a crossplay contest every year. And I was actually chosen as the runner-up. I was the second best boy in a dress at all of GenCon. Which was fantastic. But as a part of that contest, I actually learned how much work these people put into their costumes, because I pretty much bought all the components of mine. The only thing I had to really work at was getting the boots, and even then that was just that was commissioning them from a cosplayer who knew how to make boots, because I sure as hell don't. And to be totally honest, when I went in for that for the contest, I sat down next to this boy who was dressed up as girl video game character. I really don't know who the hell he was supposed to be, because I don't know what the kids are into these days. But his costume was amazing, and he had, like, this big elaborate... and by the way, there is a periscope of the whole thing that Ms. Too Good for Twitter took, and I'm going to get that on the YouTubes too. But in the meanwhile, so he had this big, elaborate, kind of like wooden staff, but it wasn't made out of wood, it was made out of foam. I lost where my camera is. So, big wooden staff with the, like, this, it was sort of a question mark shape with these spikes coming out of it that he had made himself. And he said he put, like, a year of work into the goddamn costume. And I felt like an absolute asshole, because I showed up basically in stuff that I let other people make pretty much off the rack. I mean, I got the actual costume that I wore, I got off eBay from some Chinese costume maker that'll make it to whatever size you want, and it's probably just some sort of sweatshop or whatever. And the wig was store-bought, and, Kim made the earrings for me. But beyond that, I kind of felt like a jerk, because these people had put huge amounts of work into it, and the only work I put into it was I shaved every inch of my body hair, and I do mean every friggin' inch, but that's not a detail you probably needed to know. So it made me gain a lot of respect for what cosplayers do, and as sort of a personal thing, like, I would like to do... Because of the response I got, I think I'm going to make the Angry GM's crossplay charity thing a thing every year, where I'm going to try and raise money for various charities, and if it's successful, I will go ahead and crossplay as some character or another. But one of the things I'm devoting myself to this year is learning how to make at least some of the components of the costume myself, so that I feel a little more like a genuine cosplayer. And I might even do, as sort of a side thing, I might talk about some of my experiences with that in a couple of articles. Not take up any of my feature articles or anything else on the website, but just talk about my experience learning how to put together a costume. And but that's something to think about for the future. Actually cosplaying, though, at the convention was fantastic. People kept stopping me. They wanted pictures. I mean, Imperial Star Destroyer, does it have to be crossplay? It's funny. One of the things that I've learned in the last few years is that one of the best ways to raise money is to either hurt yourself or embarrass yourself. So, for example, like the 24-hour endurance challenges, or the ice bucket challenge, or crossplay. So, yeah, I think I'm going to devote myself to making it a crossplay every year. Especially because it's kind of fun. I mean, all right, so one of the common topics of discussion with my costume, there were two things that people kept asking me. So, first of all, people keep asking you to stop and take pictures, and that is absolutely a lot of fun. People love having their pictures taken with the characters. And, and there seem to be rules. I learned a little bit of etiquette. Like, if you sit down on the floor, that is a signal that you are sort of off duty as a cosplayer, and people won't bother you. Infobro, Samus Aran, that's an interesting story. I have an interesting story about Samus Aran crossplay from this year's GenCon, as it happens. Hold on a sec, I'll bring that up. But anyway, so there's certain things like you don't bother a cosplayer when they're eating, you don't bother a cosplayer while they're sitting on the floor, or if they have any of the components of their costume taken off. All of that is an indicator that they're off duty and you leave them alone. But if they're walking around the convention floor, there is absolutely nothing wrong with walking up to them and saying, hey, your costume looks great, can I get a picture? Or even just great costume. Everybody loves to hear that. And one of the things that cosplaying made me was it made me braver about asking other cosplayers if I could take pictures with them or of them or whatever. Because in years past, I've seen some amazing costumes, and I've been sort of like, I don't know, is taking pictures bothering them or whatever? Because it's sort of a weird space that it exists in, because they're just there for their own fun, but at the same time, they are there because they love the attention. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with asking a cosplayer, hey, can I take a picture, as long as they're not sitting down or eating or have components of their costume removed or something else that indicates they're off duty. And I will tell you from firsthand experience, the attention is great. It was so much fun to be told, oh my god, your costume looks great, can I take a picture with you? And then there were two common topics of discussion that came up with my costume. The first one was, my legs are fantastic. People kept telling me I had great legs for the costume. So that's another reason for me to do crossplay in the future, because it's always nice to hear nice noises about how you look. And it really helps with sort of the body issues, and the camera just fell. That was a thing. Yep, and you can see I'm using some books to shore it up there, including the Pathfinder rulebook there. So let's get that out there more. Sorry about that, guys. Huh. Yep. That's a thing. Okay. So rotate a little bit this way. Get it off the corner. So the other thing that kept coming up was the heels, because I was walking around in heels the whole time. And let me tell you, that by itself should have earned all of the charity money, because that, like, I don't know why women do it. I really don't. And in fact, from what I learned, women don't anymore. There are very few women who actually voluntarily wear heels, because everybody kept asking me, like, how are you walking around in those heels? How are you finding the heels? And it was especially women. And I was like, oh my god, I hate them. I don't know how you do it. And every time I said that to a woman, I don't know how you walk around in heels, the women were like, we don't. That's why we never wear them anymore. I'm like, oh, okay. But I did actually navigate the convention very successfully in the heels, though there was one moment where I inadvertently crippled myself by having to sprint from point A to point B, insofar as I could. But the interesting story about Samus Aran cosplay was I was actually talking to a friend of mine at GenCon, actually a friend of mine's wife. So I got to run into Jim McClure, who part of the One Shot Podcast Network. He does Talking Tabletop. He interviewed me a while ago. It's an absolutely fantastic podcast where he talks to various people from around the gaming industry, and I highly recommend it. But I got to talk to his girlfriend, and she said that I should enter the crossplay contest because my costume was amazing, and she was also jealous of me that I made a better Sailor Jupiter than she did a few years ago. She's apparently heavy into the cosplay scene. But one of the things she told me is that a couple of years ago, there had been the crossplay contest had been kind of lame a few years ago, and the guy who won came dressed as Samus Aran, and he was just basically in the Samus Aran power suit, and there's nothing about that indicates like any sort of cross-dressing at all. It's just, a guy in a robot suit. And while there are feminine elements to Samus's costume, I mean the waist and the general shape of it and the legs, it is still hardly crossplay, and she was extremely offended that he won because she felt that he hadn't captured the spirit of the crossplay. My personal feeling, and I don't know if I want to say this publicly, so we'll just keep this between you and me, whoever's listening. If I am going to do crossplay, then I very obviously want to do crossplay. I want to do something that is sort of very feminine or very girly or what have you. And again, that's part of it is for the, I don't want to say embarrassment element, but that's part of the fun of it for me. and that's why I'll probably do that in the future. And I'm actually considering next year doing Summoner Yuna from Final Fantasy X. She's one of my favorite characters, and her outfit is absolutely gorgeous. She wears sort of a sort of very stately kimono that is absolutely beautiful, and she carries a staff, so I'll get to learn how to make props, and there's going to be some, like you have to learn how to put patterns on the fabric and stuff. So I might try that since I have a year to learn how to do it. And then we'll try to raise more money for charity. And while I'm on the subject, I want to thank two people, especially of all of the... Infobro says, well, obviously I meant Zero Suit Samus. Well, yeah, but here's the thing with Zero Suit Samus. It's just a friggin' bodysuit. There's no effort in that costume at all. So... Besides, fuck Zero Suit Samus, because that whole end sequence of Metroid Zero Mission was absolute and utter horse shit. Yeah, so, yeah, we're not even going there. As far as I'm concerned, Zero Suit Samus does not exist in my canon. But, enough about the cosplay. Oh, wait, there was one other thing. I just wanted to give a shout out to two particular people who went above and beyond the call in... with the donations of the charities. First of all, Mad Adventurer was my first donation. He gave a sizable donation right off the bat, pretty much as soon as the charity went live. He sort of seeded the pot and got the momentum started. So thank you very much, Mad Adventurer, for that. I really wish he had been at the con. It would have been a good time. And you and I have to have a Skype and talk about some of the stuff that I can't talk about publicly just yet, because some very interesting stuff happened that may be of interest to people in the future, but not for tonight. Second one is a guy named Nanban Jim, who donated over $240. I think it worked out to be $220. He donated well over $200 because he got it in his head that we were going to double my goal. And my goal was $600. So, and we hit $1,400 at the end. So that was amazing. But he got it in his head that we were going to double the goal. So first of all, he gave me over $200, and then after that, and I shouldn't say me because it's all going to charity. And after that, he started tweeting the hell out of it. He just kept advertising it. He wanted to see it double its goal. And I'm going to talk to him especially about some sort of thank you gift. But I'm looking at a way that I can thank basically everybody who was involved in donating. So I'm going to be reaching out to those people and see if I can send them a little something that says, hey, thanks. But that aside, let's talk about some of the other stuff that came out of GenCon and the reason why I even need a table camera here. So, first of all, this is just a little thing, but I'll open with this. It's not really a funny story or anything. But every year, I'm going to have to... Every year there is a custom exclusive GenCon dice set. So this is the one from this year. I picked it up at the Crystal Cast booth. I think you could also get it at the ChessX booth, but I'm not sure. And with a coupon from your GenCon program book, actually your coupon book that you get from GenCon, you get this exclusive D6 that has GenCon 2016. You're going to have to bear with me. It's going to be a little hard for me to play with the camera because it is sideways to me. But GenCon 2016 right on the dice. So that's just a cool thing. I actually am embarrassed because although this was my 5th or 6th GenCon, I've never bothered to pick up the dice set before, which seems kind of stupid. But there you go. If you go to GenCon, get the GenCon exclusive dice bag. So... I want to show off a few other things that I kind of tried to show off on Periscope. One of the most exciting things was, this is going to be tricky. I'm going to have to bring this camera up a little bit. Just bear with me. I need a few more Pathfinder tomes to raise the camera up a bit. So nobody get motion sick here. Blah, blah. Bam. Okay. This is something that I was very excited about. This is a board game called Ultimate Scheme, and I'm actually gonna do a real... Whoop. You guys are looking right at my crotch here, so let's just slide the camera over a little bit. And slide the game over a little bit. this is something that I was very excited about. So the name Rich Baker is right on there, and just to give some context, Alex and Rob. By the way, R.L. Ritchie, I discovered his real name is not real life Ritchie, as I had always assumed. Because I got to meet him, and I got to meet his girlfriend Alex, and they were a lot of fun to hang out with. Also got to hang out with Shannon Steele from Gamers Table Podcast, and her boyfriend Brandon. They were a lot of fun. In fact, one of the highlights of my con was hanging out with the four of them and just like playing board games for a little while. But anyway, so Ultimate Scheme. It was put out by Sasquatch Games by by Rich Baker. And Sasquatch Games is Rich Baker, Dave Noonan, and Steve Schubert, and they have other people involved now, but they were originally the guys who put together Primeval Fool. And the most exciting thing about Primeval Fool is that under the additional design credits, I'm not sure if you can make it out there, but under additional design, that last name on the line, on the same line as Ed Greenwood, is a name that you might recognize as the given name of a very angry person. So that was me. They actually invited me to do some design work on their flagship product, the Primeval Fool campaign setting. The year that I went to GenCon to get my book, Rich asked me if I wanted to participate in a playtest of this board game he had just developed called Ultimate Scheme. So Ultimate Scheme, and I'm actually gonna prove that even though my last unboxing video was kind of a joke, I actually do know how to do an unboxing video, so I'm gonna open it up and show off. Now I realize this is not a real unboxing video because this has already been unboxed, but so Ultimate Scheme is a resource collection supervillain type game, and I don't know that I have enough. I'm gonna have to move the camera back a little, or move my computer back a little bit here. So I gotta move the laptop back a bit so that you can see some of the board. But basically, it is a resource collection type game. I'm gonna see how well we can bring the camera out a little bit. I don't think you're going to be able to see the whole board, but you can kind of see that the board is divided into these different regions, and the idea is turn by turn you move your little minions around the board. Whoops, don't get away. So you move your little minions around the board to collect resources like occult resources, science resources, and money resources or finance resources, along with action cards and ninja cards and extra minions and stuff, which is sort of, if you've ever played like Lords of Waterdeep, that sort of play style is not new to you. It's because it's sort of worker placement and resource gathering. But the difference is you actually have to be able to move around the board. Your minions can't just be placed each turn. And there are ways, if your minion is in the same place as someone else, to block them from gathering resources or to use various actions against them, which is really cool because a lot of resource management type games and a lot of worker placement type games have very limited ways for the players to interact. So this adds a more competitive element to it, which is kind of neat. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is you are going to be one of several factions, like the New Luddite Front, or Wraith, or Das Moonreich, or Professor Roboto, or the Six Fingers, or the New Bolsheviks, or the Cult of Tentacly Doom, or my personal favorite, Gigaton Industries, which I have now played several times. Each villainous organization has a different special power they can use, and in addition, each villainous organization is going to have a specific evil goal that will determine when they beat the game, like creating global chaos, or destroying rock and roll, or building the master AI, or whatever, founding an evil coffee empire. Okay, so the combination of your faction and your goal create different strategies every time you play, which is really awesome. In addition, there is always going to be there's an X factor in the game. So there's going to be a random card that changes how you have to play the game. So the Cult of Tentacly Doom might be trying to destroy rock and roll, but the X factor in the game, which is something that everybody has to meet, is with ninjas, which means that everybody has to execute at least one ninja scheme before they can win. So between the X factor that's in play on everyone and the different factions and the different schemes, the game requires you to have a different strategy every time you play. It's really, really replayable. Obviously, the gameplay itself, most of the game is around gathering resources and then committing specific criminal acts, like performing a sacrifice at Stonehenge, or reprogramming the satellites, or building a fraudulent empire. Overall, it's a really fun game, and I fell in love with it. Now, the first time they kickstarted it, the game didn't do so well. In fact, the Kickstarter did not succeed. And they had envisioned, a really nice game with very expensive components and what have you, and cubes and stuff. But they went back and retooled the game and started to use like little cardboard chits. I'll show you some of the resource markers here. So these are your science resource tokens, which are basically just punched out. They came in the little cardboard thing, and they're just little punched out cardboard discs marked with the science symbol. But that's just fine. I mean, they scaled back the expense of the game, and second Kickstarter pass made it happen, and they got the first ones at GenCon. I think I paid $40 for this. I'm not sure if that's the final price point, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be somewhere around there. So if you can get your hands on this, I highly recommend this game. I actually played it briefly. We didn't get to play a whole game because some stuff went down, but I did play it briefly with R.L. Ritchie and Alex A. Klitsky, I think is her handle here, and also Gamers Table Shannon. And that was, it was a lot of fun. So we got to try that one out. Whoops. No, Alright, so that was one I was very excited about, and I got to actually talk to Dave Noonan, which some of you may or may not know. He's kind of actually a personal hero of mine, and he kind of started me on an interesting journey a couple of years ago by saying giving me some sort of personal advice that I don't, it's between me and him, but he, I really owe him a huge debt of gratitude, because honestly, the Angry GM, Patreon, and everything that's happened since then probably would not have happened without him. So I know he's not listening, but you guys, I just want you to know Dave Noonan is awesome. Plus, if you don't know who he is, Dave Noonan worked on D&D 3rd edition and some of 4th edition. For a long time, he, alongside Mike Merles, was the voice of the D&D podcast. He edited the Dungeon Master's Guide for 3.5. I'm going to go ahead and check this out here, since I have it handy, since it's right over here in my game library. Design, Monty Cook. Additional design. So he was additional design. Yeah, he was. I think he was responsible for the DM's Guide 2. There was a couple of other things that he had his name on. He wrote the adventure that was part of the Shackled City adventure path called The Lost Module of Sajkanth. R.L. Ritchie's saying there's a Periscope with him, right? And yeah, there was. He was the guy in the Periscope who was telling me about Ultimate Scheme, but the video quality was so bad I wanted to show it off here. Speaking of fangirling, if you are a fan of the GM Word of the Week, you might remember an episode called The Ring, or called Ring, in which I briefly discussed a story about the artist Phil Foglio, or Phil Foglio. I'm not entirely sure how to say his name. I always thought it was Phil Foglio. But Phil Foglio, he was responsible for the What's New with Phil and Dixie comic in Dragon Magazine for many, many years. Inadvertently implied that he had been fired and had to apologize profusely in his farewell comic. That whole story is in a fantastic podcast called The GM Word of the Week. The episode is called Ring. Go check it out if you're not a fan. But he's also responsible for this fantastic comic called Girl Genius. And Girl Genius is a comic about Agatha Heterodyne, who is the last descendant of the Heterodyne family. It is a steampunk alternate history Europe-ish setting. I don't even know if it's actually Europe. I absolutely love his art style, which I'm just going to show off some of the pages of. He has a fantastic art style. He also he did the Myth Adventure series of Oz and Skeeve, but the reason that I already owned Girl Genius #1, that was nothing new, but I did buy a new copy, and the reason I bought a new copy is because he was actually there to sign it. That's right. I now have a signed #1 by Phil Foglio, and holy crap did I fangirl out. I hate to say it, but I almost squeed. Oh yeah, Net Battler is pointing out Europa is the main continent, not Europe. So yeah, I am a huge fan of his, and I kind of lost it a little bit, and I'm like, oh my god, I write this podcast called The Word of the Week, and I talk about the whole story about the ring and the Circle of Metal Banding and whatever, and he was very gracious and happy, because these people love to know you're a fan, and I actually didn't creep him out that much. I'm exaggerating a little bit. Actually, Sean and Kim said I came off fairly normal. Yeah, and Carpe Diem says, and his voice sounds just like his art looks. Yes, it does. But then the funny thing is that after he signed the book here, which is this scrawl is apparently his signature, and for all I know, he could have been everybody. Mad Adventure is telling me there's a Girl Genius card game. Are you shitting me? Why didn't I know about that? Anyway, I'll have to look into that. But apparently there's a Girl Genius card game. Check out the details and let me know. So he handed the book off to this sullen, silent guy sitting next to him, and that guy started writing in my book. And I didn't know who the hell that guy was. I'm like, hey, who the hell are you? Well, I didn't say anything because I don't want to offend or anything, but apparently somebody wrote, the other guy drew this, which is Che, and apparently that's Cheyenne Wright who does the coloring, and I didn't know that, Phil Foglio didn't color it, but then I realized that I think when he originally did this, he did it in black and white, so it kind of makes sense that the color was added. Speaking of meeting people, and the reason why, if you get the chance to hang out with the Angry GM at a convention, you absolutely should, is because I had one hell of an encounter with the Andy Looney. And it's actually a hilarious story that I want to share because, okay, so first of all, everybody knows Flux, right? We all know Flux, the game where the rules are constantly changing, and there's like 1,000 different versions of Flux now because it's going the way of Munchkin and Love Letter, and then there was Munchkin Love Letter. And you know what? Can I just say one thing about the whole Munchkin Love Letter bullshit? So here's the deal. Oh, thank you. Tyrion Alexander loved the cosplay. Did you say hello to me at any point? You saw me there? Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Okay. So, I want to take a second to just talk about friggin' Steve Jackson Games, because once upon a time, Steve Jackson Games actually used to publish games, and I'm kind of pissed off now that all they do is publish Munchkin, and I joke that they are trying to prove that you can run a game company without a game designer. All you need is some artists and a copy machine, because that's all they do now. They just photocopy Munchkin with a different fucking license on it, and that's all well and good, but then along comes AEG. And AEG now is obsessed with slamming Love Letter onto every goddamn thing. So now there's a million different versions of Love Letter. And don't get me wrong, Love Letter is a fun game, but it's not the second fucking coming. And yet people love Love Letter. And then we have Munchkin Love Letter. And that's pretty much the singularity. That is the point at which the entire card game industry collapses in on itself. Because we have one endlessly photocopied game shoehorned into another. And I am so fucking sick of it. So, fuck you, Steve Jackson. Fuck you, AEG. Make some new goddamn games. Maybe bring GURPS back. I liked GURPS. Anywho, that aside, the Andy Looney story. So, here's the deal with Andy Looney. Like I said, Flux. Everybody knows Flux. But there's another game that Andy Looney worked on called Chronauts. which I personally love. And this led to, and I'm actually going to show off some of the mechanics of Chronauts because it's a little less well known. So I'm going to show it off in just a second, but I really want to tell this story. And Rob and Alex, who are in the chat, and Shannon, and I think Shannon's boyfriend Brandon were all here for this story, and it was absolutely fantastic. So we're sitting at a Starbucks in the hotel, and we decided to have a quiet Saturday night and just play some board games. So I brought down a pile of board games from my room because I was staying in that hotel, and we're all sitting there, and I've got the stack of games set up on the side, but we're all just shooting the ball about gaming and whatever, and we're not really playing the board games. And then all of a sudden, this weird little entourage of people comes wandering through, and there's this one guy at the lead, and he's like pointing at different tables. He's going like, okay, so if you see your game being played, that's 2 points, and if you see your game on the table being considered for play, that's 1 point. And at that point, he walks past our table, and he's pointing at my stack of games when he says, and if you see your game being considered for play, that's 1 point. And I heard that line, and I called over to him. I don't know who he is at this point. I have no idea who I'm talking to. I just waved. I'm like, hey, come over here a second. He said, so I don't know which one of you guys has a game being considered on my table, but if you want to get 2 points, we can certainly start playing a game right now in the bid. Just start bidding, and however much money you want to put down, then you can get your 2 points. And that's when I saw that the guy was wearing his badge, and it was Andy Looney who was doing all the talking. Andy Looney, the head of Looney Games, who designed Flux, who designed Chronauts, who also, he's also the inventor of those little stacking pyramid things that they're now using for a bunch of different games. And keep an eye out for that, because Pyramid Stacking Arcade or whatever is coming out next month, and it's like you get this case of all the little stacking pyramids. If you've never seen them, go look them up. And there's like all the rules for all the different stacking pyramid games in there. I think Dimensions is one of them. But anyway, so he's a little taken aback. He's like, well, I'm not gonna, the whole shakedown for money thing I'm not going to go for. And then I looked, I'm like, are you Andy Looney? And, he's Andy Looney. So I'm like, I picked up Chronauts off the top of the stack, and I turned to everybody at the table, and I said, hey guys, how would you like to learn the most fantastic time-traveling board game ever made that involves competitive logic puzzle solving in which one of you might be an intelligent cockroach trying to start World War III? And then I picked up, and this is true, again, they will confirm this, there is no embellishment in the story, and then I picked up the entire rest of the stack of my games and dropped it on the floor. Right then and there, removing everything from consideration except Chronauts. Andy Looney looked at me and he said, and if you get an unsolicited sales pitch for your game, that's 3 points to all of his friends. And then I said to him, I will make you a deal. I will teach these fine people how to play Chronauts right now so you can get your 2 points. And then, but you must do me the honor of signing my copy of Chronauts. And he did so, but before he did that, he starts digging through his pockets, and he starts pulling out pens and looking for stuff, and he says something along the lines of, you have activated my request for autograph routine. And my request for autograph routine requires that I first take out one of these keepers, which is an Andy Looney keeper, and sign it, specifically to you. And then he explained the rules on the card, which is play this card when you play this card, play it face up on the table in front of you, then brag or make up a story about the time you got to meet the inventor of Flux. And then he turned to me and he said, but you don't have to make up the story, you can just tell this one. He then pointed out that in regular Flux, Andy Looney counts as a friend. In Cthulhu Flux, Andy Looney gives you a clue or whatever. I don't know the rules of Cthulhu Flux or whatever. Andy Looney is also a knight of the Round Table in whatever Flux, the Monty Python Flux. So then he signed my copy of Chronauts. He also signed cards for both for Richie and Alex and for Shannon and Brandon. So everybody walked away with signed cards. So then I proceeded to teach the game of Chronauts, and I'm just going to show you the quick and dirty version so that if you don't know anything about this game, you can go ahead and buy it because it is absolutely the most fantastic game you will ever play. I love this game so much. I'm just trying to find the damn timeline here. And then as I'm explaining the rules, he kept wandering back over to the table and effectively heckling me as I explained the rules of the game. Now, as Richie and Alex discovered, I actually take teaching games extremely seriously. And I'm good at it, okay? It is one of my skills. I'm good at explaining and teaching things. And one of the things is, like, this is what I don't understand. When you go to learn a game, why is it so hard for people to get this? But yeah, Alex is saying you're a very good teacher, by the way. I know I am. Okay? And that's because I understand some very basic things. Number one, start with the goal of the game. Tell people, what is the premise of the game and what are you trying to do when you win? That's always the first thing you explain. And that is so complicated to people. But anyway, I'm just going to quickly lay out a little bit of the timeline of Chronauts here so that you can kind of see how it works out. So on the board, you're going to or on the table in between everybody, you're going to have this timeline, which you can see it represents different events through human history, starting 1865 with the assassination of Lincoln, Andrew Johnson's impeachment in 68, the Titanic sinking in 1912, in 1914, Archduke Ferdinand is assassinated, the Lusitania sinking, U.S. declaring war on Germany, yada, 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 on through Hitler opening the 36 Olympics, and this goes on and on through the year 2000 or something like that, and then with the expansion pack, so the last year is the Columbine High School massacre in 1999, and then there is an add-on set that adds 2000, 2001 through 2008, which we were also playing with. So the basic premise of the game is that you are a time traveler from the future who is trying, from an alternate future, not from our future, who is trying to get back to their home timeline. But in order to do so, they have to manipulate the timeline so that their future will exist. So, for example, now, how that works is there are certain events on the timeline that are considered linchpin events. These are important historical events. They have to go the way they did, and if they don't go that way, history becomes unstable. So, for example, the assassination of Lincoln is a linchpin event. And if someone flips it over by saving Lincoln, you can see that now Lincoln has merely been wounded. And this causes ripples through other smaller events. Like, without Lincoln being assassinated, Andrew Johnson cannot possibly be impeached because he does not have the presidency. And if the Lusitania sinks, or if the Lusitania arrives safely in 1915 rather than sinking, the U.S. actually does not declare war on Germany because that was one of the events that helped get the U.S. out of its isolationist policy and into World War I. If the Titanic was also prevented from sinking, then that also, because of all the bankers who don't lose their lives on the destruction of the Titanic, prevents the stock market from crashing. And you can see here the Great Depression relies on both the sinking of the Titanic and the destruction of the Lusitania. So the ripple events that get flipped over become paradoxes. They're holes in the space-time that must be repaired properly. And in order to repair them properly, hopefully I can find a patch here. You have patch cards that you can play over events, over paradoxes to kind of patch them. So in 1868, now we have a paradox because Lincoln was wounded, and the rest of history can't possibly play out right because all of human history is based on the fact that Lincoln was assassinated. So we have to do something to fix that, and in this case, in 1868, we can patch this by impeaching Lincoln. And now that creates a new stable timeline. In 1929, the Titanic explodes after hitting a derelict mine, which gets the Titanic back out of the time stream and resolves the paradox. Now, the basic idea, though, is that you are trying to create a specific timeline. You have 3 specific events that have to come out in the proper way for you to be able to travel back to your future that you came from. If the timeline isn't that way, then you can't get back to your future because it doesn't exist. If there are ever 13 paradoxes on the board, all of space-time explodes. It's absolutely a fantastic game because everybody is manipulating the timeline, trying to create the proper timeline for them to come from, one of which is actually like I said, a super intelligent cockroach that assumes that World War III actually started. There's a couple other goals to the game that you can do to win, but that's the basic gameplay, and it's really amazingly fun game. I love this game a whole hell of a lot. I am so proud that Andy Looney got to see how much I love this game overall, because I know everyone talks about Flux with him, but I'm much happier to talk about Chronauts. One of the most interesting things about it, though, is that on the website for the game, Andy Looney actually explains his logic for each and every one of the alternate history things, including things like why a Zeppelin factory might open in Seoul, South Korea, if the Korean War is prevented and the Hindenburg disaster is prevented. Also, by wandering over to Looney Labs booth at GenCon, they also gave me this promotional pack of extra cards that I can add to a Flux game. So that was all a lot of fun. I also managed to find just at sort of the whatchamacallit, the consignment, which is where basically people can go to sell off their games at GenCon. I was able to find a copy of Tomb of Horrors, the original Tomb of Horrors, which one of the worst adventures ever written. I also did find why didn't I take it out? Hold on a second, I'm getting it. I also got this sweet puppy, The Village of Hamlet, the first in the Elemental Evil series, which is much better. And they were both pretty cheap. I think this was like $8 and this was $12 or something like that. Tomb of Horrors is absolutely a terrible, terrible adventure. It really is awful. It is one of the worst written adventures in existence. It is one screw job after another. It is an example of piss-poor game design. And Gary Gygax, God rest his soul, should be embarrassed that he ever wrote it. I hate this adventure, and I hate that it's associated with him. So I had to own a copy. My goal someday is to own all of the copies and to friggin' burn them. And then I also found this, which I know came out recently, and I didn't need to find it at GenCon. And I haven't really looked over it yet, but this is one that I have sort of a personal emotional attachment to. And I had sort of only been vaguely aware of the news. So, way back in the day, when role-playing games were first sort of coming into popularity, Carpe Diem wants to see the stream where Angry goes through the whole adventure explaining all the things that are wrong with it. Carpe Diem, why are you speaking in the third person? Why not just say, I'd like to see the stream where blah, 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 blah? Why are you using the emote bullshit? Okay? You know what? From now on, I'm not responding to emotes. You either talk or you don't talk. Okay? Mad Adventure saying, didn't he write it specifically as revenge on some of his players? Yeah, he was kind of pissed off because people were power gaming and leveling up their characters and then trouncing his adventures. Which, by the way, not for nothing, that's a bad reason to write an adventure right there. So it started with a really bad goal, and then, like, a lot of the bullshit that Tomb of Horrors does is it basically, like, so in Advanced D&D, we're talking first edition now, elves had a greater chance of finding secret doors than everybody else. So there are secret doors in Tomb of Horrors that specifically say, oh, and by the way, elves can't find this any better than anybody else. I will. You know what? Carpe Diem, challenge accepted. I will come back and I will do a stream where we will go through the whole adventure and explain why every piece of it was bullshit. Okay? I will. But anyway, we're talking about Lone Wolf now. So way back in the day, when I was a kid, in addition to, role-playing games, which I didn't even know about at the time when I first discovered these things, or maybe I did. I don't remember when Lone Wolf came out. I should check that. So anyway, we had Choose Your Own Adventure books. And Choose Your Own Adventure books were basically were basically just it would give you a story and it would say, oh, you decide to go into, everybody said don't go to the spooky old McCreary house, and you decide to go anyway. So if you decide to go to the spooky old McCreary house, turn to page 28, and if you decide to go home, turn to page 12, and then you would just go through the adventure like that. Okay, so the first Lone Wolf game books were in 1984. So then you had this whole other series of books that came out called game books. Yeah, so, and basically, sorry, I was just looking at the chat here because someone challenged me if I want to burn their copy of Tomb of Horrors, I have to pry it from his cold dead hands, and fine, challenge accepted. Yeah, but anyway, so there were also these game books, and among the most famous were a series of fighting fantasy. They were called the Fighting Fantasy series, and basically what the game books were is they were basically choose your own adventure books, but they had basic RPG mechanics in there. So you would have a specific character, and you would have stats, and you would have an inventory sheet, and there were there were rules that you had to follow. So like if you encountered a monster, you had to play out a little combat with the monster, and there were certain choices that you could only make if you had the right equipment. Like I would say, if you want to try to climb the wall, turn to page 22, and then when you turn to page 22, it will say, if you have a rope, make the check with this number. If you don't have a rope, make the check with this number, and then if you succeed, go to this page, and if you fail, go to this page, which is usually you died. And there were some they were pretty basic generic adventures, the Fighting Fantasy series. And I'm pretty sure the Fighting Fantasy series was written by a guy, or at least some of them were written by a European dude. Two people, Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone. And that's sort of, if I remember correctly, that's how they sort of broke into... Oh, wait, hold on. Steve Jackson, I am totally wrong. I just pulled this up on Wikipedia to confirm this, and I have discovered that I have been wrong about something all my life. The Steve Jackson who wrote the Fighting Fantasy games is not the Steve Jackson who is Steve Jackson of Steve Jackson Games. Isn't that just embarrassing? But I'll learn something new every day, I guess. All right, so they're written by this guy Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone. But then this guy Joe Dever, whatever, and another guy Gary Chalk, he was the illustrator, came out with another series of... Right, Tyrion Alexander. Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone were the founders of Games Workshop. I knew they got into gaming somehow, but it's not our Steve Jackson, it's a different other Steve Jackson. Who also, speaking of companies that are totally fucking up, Games Workshop. But that aside, or have totally fucked up. Does Games Workshop even exist anymore? Or are they just gone? I don't even know. I've given up following that crap. Anyway, we're talking about Lone Wolf, because there was another series of games books called the Lone Wolf series. That's right, and that's where it all comes together. Okay, InfoBro is pointing out the American Steve Jackson did end up writing a couple of Fighting Fantasy books for the UK Steve Jackson. But there was a really awesome series called the Lone Wolf series, and the Lone Wolf series started with this monastery called the Kai Monastery. And the Kai were basically these spiritual monk adventurer types. They were like monk paladins, training to be like the Jedi. You know what? They were sort of like the fantasy Jedi. It was like a Jedi monastery in fantasy times. Okay, and at the beginning of the first book, which I believe was Flight from the Dark, but I can't remember because it's been a really long time. The Kai series began with Flight from the Dark, yeah. And basically, there is an invasion of monsters led by the Dark Lords, and they destroy the Kai Monastery, and there is only one survivor, the Lone Wolf, who is basically striving to teach himself the rest of the Kai teachings. And it's a series of, I want to say there were 12, I got the Wikipedia here, so there was a total of 20 books on three different levels of experience, and then they kept growing up. And then there was a spin-off series, and there were actually some novels that spun off, and there was also another game book series about a wizard who was running around in the same world at the same time doing his own little thing. So they were really awesome. They were an awesome series of books that I loved a lot. Well, it turns out somebody got in touch with Joe Dever, this Cubicle 7 Entertainment, and convinced him that it was time to make an adventure role-playing game about it. And out of sheer curiosity and attachment for the series, I picked up the adventure game. And I haven't really even looked through it yet, so I'm not even sure what's in the box. So this is actually going to be a true unboxing, except that I did sort of look through the components and see what was in here. And now they're out of order because I know that these books were on the bottom and this stuff was on the top. So you know what? I'm going to rebox this. And then we're going to make a sort of true unboxing of things. Ooh, how exciting, right? So, yeah. So this was on the top. And then this stuff. And then the books. I'm going to put this all back together. Okay, so first of all, obviously you're always going to have this these advertisements on the top. And I don't know, there's advertisement for something. I have no idea what this bullshit is. It's a role-playing game tie-in to some BBC series, like We Give a Shit, you know, so we can just dump that. Also, inside the box, for whatever reason, there is this matrix of numbers. I don't know how this works. Oh, yeah, Infobro is pointing out that a bunch of Dever fans put up digital versions of the original books with permission. Yeah, so, and go check that out. I did know about that. I haven't checked it out myself yet. But anyway, so the first thing you get is a read this first, which actually just is this little fold-out that introduces you to what's in the game, what are the components you're going to find, what do you need to play, how do you play whatever. And it's clearly labeled as read this first, which is very nice. It's a handy guide to the other components that you're going to find in the box, which is something that, quite frankly, most, box sets should have. Then we get 3 different books, and I'm not sure what these books are yet, because, again, I don't know what they are. The Book of Kai Legends, the Book of Kai Wisdom, and the Book of Kai Training. So we're just going to take a quick look at the Book of Kai Training here, just to see what the artwork is like inside. The books are really nice quality. Paper is nice and thick and glossy. It's creating your own character. So here we have, I guess this is what a character sheet looks like in the game, which actually seems nicely streamlined and well organized. Yeah, so, and then we've got the Book of Kai Legends here, whatever this is. Oh, okay, so this seems to be an adventure of some kind, based on what I'm seeing here. And it actually, I'm just gonna, just bear with me a second while I turn it around. Yeah, so this seems to be, welcome to your first adventure in Lone Wolf, or possibly your first ever adventure anywhere. So this is teaching the narrator. The adventure is designed to introduce the player and narrator to the world of Lone Wolf, teach the player something new and useful about the rules in each scene, make sure every player gets to do something in the adventure, role-playing with each other, interacting with the narrator's character, yada, yada, yada. So this is a teaching adventure, which is actually really nice. I am definitely going to review this. It seems like there are nice, clear icons calling things out. Not sure what the icons mean yet, but there's tips in the bottom. There seem to be little sidebars like keeping things moving. If this actually stands the test of time, or the test of me actually reading it, I might have a lot of nice things to say about this box set eventually. We will find out. And also, it's nice because it does put summaries of the rules on the back. I just noticed that. So the rules in a nutshell: pick a character, make a test, yada, yada, yada. How to create your own characters on the back of the training book. And then we've got the Kai Wisdom book, which is, this seems to be the rule book itself. So we've got a rule book, a character generation book, and a module. Which, fine, that sounds good. And then, these are your character sheets. So if you want pre-generated characters, they're actually these really nice fold-outs. So here we have the character Brightshield. And if we open it up, we get his character sheet inside, and descriptions of his weapon. Kai Lords are warriors first and foremost, and these are weapons that you carry with you. So sort of explaining what's on the character sheet. And yeah, so it's basic explanation of what's on the character sheet, and a little blurb about who the character is. So we have Bright Shield, we have, I guess I'll turn it sideways so that we can see, we have Dawn Thunder, we have Night Fox. I like these names. Moonblade, Storm Sparrow, True Song, and then we have a combat results table, and ooh, pretty little handouts just to show off. This is what some equipment might look like. I dig that. And we've got a map, and then it looks like we've got a booklet of blank character sheets, and some tokens in the bottom. Not sure quite what those do yet, but there we go. So all in all, this seems to be a really nice little package. I really like this set a lot. Based on what I'm seeing, is there anything on the back of the character sheets? Yeah, there seems to be more character sheet back there. So there's a front and back on the character sheets. So there's that. All in all, this is a really nice set, and I think, depending on how the game plays, of course, because, you know, that's always the test of the game, is how well it plays and how well everything is actually written and explained. But what was the price point on this? Okay, so let's play a game here. Everybody guess the price point. For everything I just showed you, guess how much you're paying. For a complete role-playing game adventure that has everything you need to play it except dice, and teaches you how to play the game with the tokens and everything, guess the price point. Okay, I'm not seeing any price points yet. I'm thinking the Twitch stream. You know what? I'm going to get some more booze while you get guess the price point. Everybody guess the price point. I will be right back. Dun, 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 dun. Hey, guessing the price point. Guessing the price point. Okay, guessing the price point. Guessing the price point. Guessing the price point. Guessing the price point. Da 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 da. Guessing the price point. Da 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 da. Okay, everybody has their answers. Okay, so let's see what answers we've got. Matt Adventurer says $29.95. And looking down at, you are the closest. The correct answer is $29.99. $29.99 for that. I've got a couple of $40. Ali RPG says $50. Carpe Diem says the ridiculous $15. Matt the Warbo says 500 new yen. Fuck you, Matt the Warbo. We don't play Shadowrun here. Imperial Star Destroyer, $39.99. Rigion says $70. Oh, wait, it's not a Fantasy Flight game. Yeah, you can tell that because the box doesn't weigh 90 pounds. Carpe Diem says, as a library, I will avoid looking it up. R.L. Ritchie says $30, which basically you're sorry you went over. Alex says $40. And Matt the Warbo says, as an asshole, I will answer in non-dollars. And yeah, I did call you out on that, didn't I? So yeah, $30 fucking dollars for a complete game that teaches you how to play. Not $150. Now, you could argue that, oh, well, this isn't like a premium RPG because, you know, it's not D&D or whatever. But there is, well, some of us play Shadowrun. Like, I give a shit. Wait, who said, Matt the Warbo says R.L. Ritchie is closer by 4 cents, but R.L. Ritchie went over. Okay, didn't you guys ever watch the show? It's the closest price without going over, and that's why Mad Adventurer gets to come up and play today's pricing game, which will be Plinko. Right, that was Price is Right? Okay, so I am actually really super happy with this purchase. I'm really excited. And then, okay, this is one last goofy thing, and then a couple of pieces of news, and then I'm going to open up to Q&A, so everybody start queuing up your questions. But over at the Steve Jackson Games booth, this drew my attention. This is Bill and Ted's Excellent board game. I didn't know this was a thing, but as an 80s and early 90s kid, mid to late 80s, early 90s kid, I had to check this out, and they demoed the game, and I'm just going to show off a little bit of Bill and Ted's Excellent video game. Now, this is one of those standard board games which has very little to do with Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. But I was just so excited to see... Oh, Matt the Warbo says I actually meant yen, not new yen. Like, I give a shit. I was just so excited to see that Steve Jackson Games had put out something that wasn't Munchkin that I pretty much had to throw money at. In fact, I wanted to pay 3 times the cost for this thing just to tell them, yeah, guys, it's okay to make a game that isn't friggin' Munchkin. So the basic idea, and there's 4 players, but I'm just gonna show off one just to like lay things out on the board. So basically, the idea of the game is to wander around the board, collecting the historical dudes and dudettes, or I'm sorry, and dudette, because it was just the Joan of Arc. Though, oh, actually, the princesses are also in this. So you've got the princesses, Lincoln, Socrates, Genghis Khan, Napoleon, Frood. We have the Royal Ugly Dudes who get little standees. And we have the Sheriff. The Sheriff here. And so the basic idea is very much like Robo Rally, which is another game that I have a lot of fun with. On your turn, you choose 3 cards to play. And they just have fun art on them. And then your phone booth will execute the moves that you have played in order. So, like this first card is turn left, or I'm sorry, turn right. Everything is sort of reversed for me. So we turn right, go straight, turn left, go straight, and then we pick up Genghis Khan, and then turn left again and go straight again. Okay, but then once you've picked up characters, once you've picked up characters in your phone booth, because having too many characters in your phone booth makes your phone booth go kind of crazy. Each character on the back has a set of instructions too, like turn around and go forward. So on your turn, before you execute your moves, you have to execute the moves for anybody you are carrying. So Genghis Khan will now always cause the phone booth to turn around and then go forward before the card you choose. So basically, although you're trying to collect the most people and complete your history report and use the power of music to usher in utopia, the more historical dudes and dudettes you collect, the more difficult it is to control your time machine. It's actually a pretty simple, straightforward game, but as someone who is a huge fan of Robo Rally, I really like the mechanics in this, and obviously I like the art style on the cards is pretty cute. So you can see it's just different images. Like the images on the card have absolutely nothing to do with the card movement or whatever. And some of the cards do cause the sheriff or the royal ugly dudes to move around also. I'm not quite sure. I haven't read all the rules yet, but that's all the mechanics. Robot Dance Angry? I don't know Robot Dance. Is that a game? Anywho. So those are my acquisitions from GenCon. Also, while I was at GenCon, one other thing I did was I ran seminars for the first time. I ran 2 seminars. The first was one called the Angry GM's GMing Boot Camp, which was, and I don't need the table cam anymore, so we can just, whoops. I'm going to go ahead and expand this so that we can get into the Q&A portion of tonight. Fit the screen. And then Control C. There we go. So look at me. I'm becoming like an expert at this shit, aren't I? So anywho, I ran 2 seminars. The first one was called the Angry GM's GMing Bootcamp, and it was basically a summary of how to run your first game if you've been a player for a while, and also the basic GMing skills that you need to learn to run your first game. So it was a combination of several articles that I've already written. It was extremely well received. People really loved it, even though I gave advice that a lot of other people would call really shitty advice. But then that's sort of par for the course with me, isn't it? Everybody thinks my advice is shitty, except the people who actually take it and discover that it's the best friggin' advice out there. The second thing was the Angry GM's 7 words you can't say in role-playing games, and the basic focus on that was tearing down all the crappy advice that other GMs out there on the web are giving. I had intended to record both seminars, and due to some equipment problems, that did not happen. However, because people wanted to see them so badly, and because I had promised them as part of the charity cosplay thing that I would do the things in the costume, I am going to actually re-record the seminars here with my little setup. I actually have a good clip-on microphone, and yes, Jasmine is saying, is metagaming one of the 7 words? Of course, actually, metagaming was the first of the 7 words. The 7 words were divided into 3 categories, which were just plain crap, which is the one that metagaming was. Then there were 3 words that were vague to the point of useless, and then there were the words that were about mismatched expectations. So, yeah. So I am going to re-record both seminars here in my apartment for the internet so that I can put them up on the YouTubes and make good on my promise of recording them. And I will do so in the costume because, again, it was part of the deal for the charity, and I got to do that. The other thing that happened, the final thing that happened, and I'm working on cleaning this up today and tomorrow, is that I did run a session of the Sailor Moon RPG, in costume, because that was, again, one of the conditions. So I ran the Sailor Moon RPG, and again, that was Shannon was in that, and Ms. Too Good for Twitter was in that, and Alex and R.L. Ritchie, Rob, were in that too. And I don't want to make it sound like those are the only 4 people I hung out with. I hung out with a lot of people over GenCon. It was just that kind of my Saturday. We started off the morning with Shannon and Richie and Alex and Kim, who were all in that Sailor Moon game at 8 in the morning. God bless us all. And then I said, I turned and said to them, like, guys, tonight I'm trying to have just a nice light night, and so anybody who just want to come back to my hotel and just, we'll hang out in Starbucks, or we'll hang out in the bar, and we'll just play some board games for a while. And that was what led into the whole Andy Looney story. But people are asking which version of the Sailor Moon RPG. So it was actually, this is the version of the Sailor Moon RPG I ran. This is one that I have owned for years. It came out in 98. It's the Guardians of Order version. And it's based on a system called the Tri-Stat system. And I'm going to go ahead and say, by the way, that we ran it completely wrong. I did not remember any of the rules, and I did not bother learning them. So I just was making this shit up as I went. And we had a great time. And you definitely... the audio quality in the... The audio quality for the video is not great, and I'm doing my best to clean it up, but we did have some equipment problems there too. Mainly because R.L. Ritchie broke 3 of my microphones. Yeah, I shit you not. He wiped out 3 microphones of mine, destroyed my equipment, before we could get him wired up on one. Yeah, so the audio quality wasn't great, but we're doing the best we can. I did the best I could, and it does feature us singing the theme song for the Sailor Moon RPG. or for Sailor Moon. We sang the theme song, and actually, everybody really got into it because they got on camera and they did the poses for the characters' attacks and everything, and called out the attacks and everything. It was absolutely a fantastic session. It was a ton of fun. Yeah, Mad Adventure saying you don't need to know the rules if you've GM'd enough. That's definitely true. But yeah, so everyone was on camera doing poses and whatever. It was a blast. It was a ton of fun, and that's another thing that I think that I am going to do as part of the cosplay. The you know whatchamacallit, the crossplay charity event that I want to try and do every year is that I will run and record a session of an RPG appropriate to whatever costume I choose, no matter how terrible the RPG is. I do know if I do try to go with a Final Fantasy character, there is an absolutely terrible fan-made Final Fantasy RPG that is floating around out there. R.L. Ritchie is now trying to curry my favor by saying it's about the core mechanic and quoting me from one of my seminars. But yeah. So, alright. So anyway, and I guess that was most of my Gen Con experience and the fun stories that I had for the most part. So, if anybody, I've got a few minutes for Q&A. If anybody wants to ask any questions specifically about what went on at Gen Con, this is not an angry RPG or an Ask Angry thing by any stretch. If you have any questions about Gen Con, either specific things that happened or specific things I saw, or just generally about Gen Con, and going if you want to go, or cosplay experiences or whatever, let me know, and I'll answer those questions now as soon as they come up. I should point out, I did have one really sad experience, because I did have a cosplay creeper come up, which was... This weird guy came up behind me while I was in the costume, and he kind of looked me up and down, and, you know, he asked me, "Hey, so are you wearing women's panties under there?" And it was this really weird tone to his voice. I don't know if he intended any harm by it or anything, if it was just an innocent question, but it made me extremely uncomfortable, and I played it off well. I turned to him and I said, "Listen, don't you think that's a really personal question?" And he said, "I'm just saying, how do you pull off the look? Because you pull it off well." And then at that point I had to, I did have to kind of excuse myself from the situation. But, you know, it was sad. The thing is, though, it was the only event. It was the only situation like that. Yeah, so, you know, it's... The fact of the matter is, the cosplaying was almost entirely a positive experience. It was almost entirely a very welcoming, very positive experience. And all the cosplayers that I hung out with were having a great time. But there are creeps. There are people who are weird and disrespectful, and, you know, unfortunately, it has become sort of the norm to tar the whole gaming community with that brush of saying that gamers are like this. Gamers are weird, they're creepy, they're misogynistic or whatever, because of a weird select few who are just, you know, either insensitive or careless or thoughtless, or are really just assholes or creepy or whatever. And it's hard not to lose your faith in the gaming crowd. Gen Con is an extremely positive experience. And I hang out with a lot of people at Gen Con and talk to a lot of people about their Gen Con experiences, men and women. That is by no means a scientific sample, but the number of people who I personally know of who have had negative experience is far, far, far exceeded by the positive experiences that everybody has at Gen Con. It is a safe place. No matter what fear-mongering you have had, Gen Con is an entirely safe place. And if you feel that something goes wrong, there are always people on hand who will step in to protect you or to help you. I know, because I am one of them. I will not tolerate any sort of bullshit or bad treatment of anyone by anyone else. And it doesn't matter gender, race, whatever. If someone is treating you bad, I know I personally am going to step in. I have stepped in. I have intervened and told people off for talking to an artist badly, or bothering a cosplayer or whatever. I've had incidents in the past where I've had to do that. But there are a very small number of incidents, and if you're afraid to do this sort of thing, I encourage you not to be. I encourage you to realize that the geek community, especially at GenCon, is just about people delighting in their fandoms and having a great time, and it is far less judgmental than your average game store where everybody is challenged to prove their fandom. I mean, I've been challenged to prove my fandom at times, and I'm me. So, all right. So that spiel has given time for some questions to build up in the queue, and I'm going to take the questions. Mad Adventure, do you think adding Lucas Oil Stadium helped with the crowds? The only thing that was over in Lucas Oil Stadium was the anime and cosplay events, which have generally, if I recall correctly, been on the third floor of the Indianapolis Convention Center, or have been off in a hotel on their own anyway. I really don't think it changed the crowd dynamic at all. It was just as crowded as it has been in years past. I don't personally think the crowds are a huge problem anyway. It is extremely crowded. There's no way around that. You're cramming 60 to 70,000 nerds into one space. So it is going to be crowded. The public spaces in the exhibit hall are crowded. But I don't think that True Dungeon was over there too. Carpe Diem is reminding me. True Dungeon was stuck over in Lucas Oil, but I don't think it was really. I don't think it really changed that much. And honestly, because I had to participate in some of the cosplay events, then yeah, having it sectioned off so far away from the rest of the con was kind of inconvenient for the people who were involved in those events who also wanted to be involved in other things. Because if you have two events that are stacked up close together, it's sometimes tough to get from one event to another in time. And that was really out in the boonies compared to the rest of the convention. And as someone who had to make that run in heels to make the crossplay event in time, that was not fun. So, let's see. Imperial Star Destroyer, did you get a free ticket for the crossplay thing? I did. One of the prize, as a runner-up, the prize was a free ticket to next year's Gen Con. I am not keeping the ticket. I have not decided yet what to do with it, but I am not keeping it because I participated in that event solely as a charity event, and I would not feel comfortable keeping that ticket. I'm also not just going to give it away to a friend and a family member. I'm going to try to find something positive to do with that ticket for the benefit of someone else. But I personally am not keeping it. I just have to decide what I want to do with it. Matt Lawarbo says, how hard is it to go without a group? Before Ryan started going with... Ryan is my cousin, by the way. I should point out, Ryan, Sean, and Kim, that's Drum Bum, Gravy, and Ms. Too Good for Twitter, were my gaming group for 16 years when I lived back in New York before I moved. It was one of the things I actually gave up when I moved, and it was really hard. So Ryan used to attend Gen Con with me each year, and Sean and Kim didn't. Sean and Kim attended this year because I had moved away. Carpe Diem, stop scrolling the questions. Unless anybody else has questions, obviously add them to the mix. But stop responding to what I'm saying because you're just making it more confusing. Yeah, so Ryan and I had gone together a couple of years, but before that, I went alone. And, I mean, obviously, I'm not the best example because I do have a little bit of celebrity. All right, I hate saying this because of the whole humility thing, and I find it a little bit ridiculous, but I have a lot of celebrity. People recognize me, people know me by name, but years ago, people didn't. So when I first was going alone, it was just me. And when you go alone, you just make sure that you schedule plenty of events, but also, when you go alone, you have a lot of friends on the internet, people you know who are also there, so it's always good to hook up with them. It is fantastic to go even by yourself. Okay, I loved Gen Con for years before Ryan started going with me, and then before Sean and Kim came with me this year. So definitely check it out. It is so worth it. Carpe Diem is asking, how could someone get into a game with the Angry GM GenCon without him saying he's too busy because randomly finding you 6 or 7 times didn't work? This GenCon was a little bit different for me. In GenCons past, I have run lots of games. I think 2 GenCon, because I didn't go last year because I was moving across the country. But 2 years ago was kind of the pinnacle. I ran 11 pickup games in 3 days. I run a lot of games at GenCon, and usually it's just the luck of the draw. It's whoever happens to be around me or whatever that I drag with me. I'll just suddenly decide, hey, I feel like running a game. Everyone wants to be in this game. Or I'll say to people I'm hanging out with, let's get into a game. This year, because of so many other things going on, I did not run any games. Not a one. I did not run RPG session at all, except the Sailor Moon RPG that I was obligated to do by the charity drive. So that was actually kind of a disappointment, and I spent a lot of time at Gen Con catching up on people and remaking connections that I had lost in previous years. In the previous year, because I didn't go to Gen Con, and there are people that I do catch up with. There are people in the industry that I like to talk to. I pride myself on being kind of an outsider in the industry, because I'm not really in the industry. I'm just a friggin' blogger when you get down to it. I'm nobody. But obviously I do have plans to be in the industry, and that requires a certain amount of networking and schmoozing and getting to know people, and I spent a lot of time this year doing that. I had some very good, very interesting, very long conversations with some people about things they have in development and things I'm working on that, unfortunately, I can't talk about right now. But the sad fact is, apart from sectioning off a little bit of time just to have a quick board game night with a few people who were close to me, I did not run any games. So that's no offense to you, Carpe Diem. The other thing you have to remember, and again, I hate even saying this because I don't want it to be like the humble brag thing. I hate that bullshit. But I have a lot of people who want to be in games that I run. There are a lot of people who ask me to, if I'll run a game. And if I start opening up the floodgates, I'm going to be inundated. I will be running games for everybody. So, selfishly this year, because friends that I had not seen in 6 months were at Gen Con, people I moved away with, people that I had been gaming with for 16 years before I moved to the city, I did decide to spend a lot of time just hanging out with them also, because it was my chance to reconnect with them. So I'm sorry I didn't get into a game I ran, and I can't promise that next year you'll get into a game I run. It's just the way it is, and probably it's going to keep being that way for a while, because I've got some stuff that I've got to work on now. Ali RPG says he was looking at your butt. Oh, you were referring to the creeper. Sorry. Tabardson. Hey, Tabardson, when did you wander in? Did you end up with a decently located room? How hard was it to get a room at all? Okay. Let me talk about the whole room situation and the lottery situation and the good and the bad and the ugly. Because there's been a lot of press about the whole housing situation. So, a lot of people are pissing and moaning that there is not enough housing at Gen Con. I promise I'll answer this question. I will get there. But there's been a lot of pissing and moaning about the housing situation at Gen Con in general. And the reason there's been a lot of pissing and moaning about the housing situation in Gen Con is because a few years ago, several years ago actually, Indianapolis redeveloped its downtown area around its convention center. It decided to make itself a business and convention destination. That's how it was going to make its money. And so they constructed the convention center, and they attached a whole bunch of high-end hotels directly to the convention center via sky bridges. So you have the convention center, and then across the street, you have a row of 6 or 7 hotels that are connected directly to the convention center, which is fantastic. And for Gen Con, that's absolutely great if you can get into one of those hotels. The problem is there are far more people attending Gen Con than there is hotel space in those hotels. Now, normally that wouldn't be a problem, okay, because there are plenty of hotels spread out around Gen Con. And anytime I've gone on any trip or any vacation or any other convention, I just get used to the fact that I'm going to be 10, 15, 20 minutes away. I mean, you go to Disney World, unless you're dropping the fortune to have your room in one of the Disney World resorts, you're usually 10 or 15 minutes away. You're renting a car and you're driving in, or you're taking a cab or a bus or whatever in. And the cabs in Indianapolis are really cheap. So this is never a problem anywhere else. But suddenly at GenCon, if you can't get into a hotel that is directly across the street from the convention center, you lose your fucking shit. People lose their goddamn minds. Oh my god, there is no housing here because I can't walk across the street to the convention center. Well, guess what? That's how life is. And, that was never a problem before. The problem with GenCon is that it was smaller for many years, and everybody could get into those hotels, which was fantastic and convenient, and don't get me wrong, that's really nice, but it's not a necessity to go. A couple of years ago, I stayed at a hotel that was 10 blocks away. That's when I discovered that to take a cab anywhere downtown, $5. Okay, that's less than parking. That's less than the difference between that hotel room and the cost of the hotel rooms connected directly to the convention center. But people lose their minds. So GenCon said, okay, fine, if we can't block off all the room, we don't have enough housing, people are complaining, we're going to do it by lottery system. Because what GenCon does is they block off a certain number of hotel rooms. Well, they block off all the hotel rooms and the immediately connected hotels and a few other ones. So when you buy a ticket to GenCon, you get a housing code, and that housing code entitles you to one room somewhere near GenCon while supplies last. Fine. So this year, though, and in years past, it's been first come, first served. And because the servers get a little overwhelmed, and because they're not really clear about explaining things, people would log on to the hotel reservation system, and then they would have to sit there and wait with their browser open for 10, 15, 20 minutes, a half hour, an hour, whatever. And if you hit refresh, or if you close your browser, you lose your spot in line. And people didn't understand that, so they would close their browser and then lose their spot, or they would hit refresh or whatever, or they would have multiple browser windows open trying to get in, and gradually the system got overwhelmed by all of that bullshit. So rather than distributing things a little bit better, instead what they decided to do was do a random lottery system, so that when you get your hotel badge or your hotel reservation code, you are also given a random time sometime during the hotel booking session to be in front of your computer and book your hotel. And then, luck of the draw, you might get something, you might not. And the problem with that whole system is, like me, every year for GenCon before 2 years ago when they started doing the random lottery bullshit, I would get in front of my computer the minute the housing block, actually several minutes before the housing blocks were opened up to reservations. I would log in, I would sit in front of my computer, I would read a book or play my DS or something else like that, and I would wait until I got in, and I would reserve a hotel, and I would always get the hotel room that I wanted. And I always stayed at the JW Marriott, which is my favorite hotel there, which is a little off to one side, but it's absolutely a gorgeous hotel. But anyway, I never had a problem getting a hotel room until they went to the bullshit lottery system. Then suddenly I couldn't get the room I wanted. And the real problem that nobody wants to say is that the hotels, despite the fact that they are expensive, the best hotels are underpriced. That is to say, they keep the prices cheap enough to make them available to everyone. And when there's not enough of a resource to go around, pricing is one of the ways you distribute the resource, so that people who, they look at the price on the hotel at JW Marriott and say $500 a room, I can't afford that, and they'll stay somewhere cheaper, and then they won't be like, oh my god, there's not enough housing. They'll be like, this hotel is just too expensive for me. But GenCon has kind of lost their ability to let the market do its work and to allow the hotel prices to kind of settle where they actually belong. So what you have here is too many people who think they are entitled to an underpriced resource now grabbing for it, making everybody pissed off. And it's actually really stupid. I mean, try to get go to New York Comic Con. Okay? The friggin' tickets for the convention sell out in minutes. Okay? Which is why they've gone to that whole fan verification system. Which is something that GenCon never had to do, because in order to get a GenCon badge, you have to use your real name and your address. And you can't get more than one ticket. So if you want to buy a ticket for someone else, they have to be a registered user. You can buy a ticket for them as long as they're a registered user with their own name and address and email address and all of that stuff. So that's how GenCon gets around that. That said, I did get into the JW Marriott. I don't know if I want to let the secret out, but I did discover that if you are a rewards member of a certain hotel, most hotels, no matter what blocks they negotiate to hold back some rooms for their rewards members, because they always have to have those rooms available for them. So my fallback, I got lucky in the lottery and I was able to get the JW Marriott this year without a problem. But my fallback would have been to go through the reward system and get one of those rooms that way, because I am a Marriott Rewards member. That said, if you want to go to Gen Con and you can't get into a room that's directly connected to the convention center, go anyway. Take a cab. They did do away with the shuttle buses this year, which was kind of stupid, because that got you from some of the outlying hotels. But seriously, the money you will save on an outlying hotel is more than enough to make up for taking a cab to the convention. And quite frankly, if you are not either doing a gigantic cosplay that is very complicated and requires a lot of moving parts, or you're not running multiple seminars and need to bring huge amounts of equipment to and from the convention and all your game books and whatever, and you can travel fairly light, there is no reason you can't set out for the con in the morning by cab and spend all day at the convention and then go home at night. I did it years ago. Anyone can do it. Stop being so obsessive about getting into those hotel rooms. That said, okay, so let's see. So yeah, I got into a decent hotel. I got into a very good hotel. I got into the JW Marriott, which is one of the nicest hotels there, in my opinion. There's all of the hotels connected directly to the convention center are actually absolutely gorgeous, because they are intended for affluent business travelers, and it is centrally located, but it is kind of hard to get into those hotel rooms, especially with the lottery system, and especially with the system just getting overwhelmed by the sheer number of people who want to go to Gen Con. And I'm not sure I even believe the bullshit that Gen Con has gotten too big for Indianapolis, but that's not a popular thing to say, because everyone wants it out of there, because they'll think, oh, we'll get more hotel space. And you won't. Most cities aren't actually designed around this convention center with attached hotel thing. You'll find that you're staying blocks away, maybe many blocks away in a lot of cities, because the city planning around the convention center wasn't as extensive as it was in Indianapolis. Except for Vegas, Indianapolis is the top convention destination in the United States because of its excellent city planning around it. But what do I know? Nobody asks me these questions except you guys, and nobody else listens except for you guys, because you know how smart I am. For a decent hotel, transportation, and general loot, what is the average amount that one spends on Gen Con? Okay, so what are you going to spend at Gen Con? First of all, you're going to have to buy a ticket to the convention. It's a 4-day ticket, generally runs you about $120. Ran this year about $120. So that's it. That's your first chunk of change. If you want a decent hotel, you're going to pay anywhere from $150 to $250 a night. The farther away you're willing to get from the hotel, or from the convention center, the better off you'll be in terms of price, but you're going to spend $150 to $250 a night on a hotel. That's just the way it is. The solution most people go with is one person gets the hotel and everybody else camps on their floor. This year we divided the hotel amongst 4 of us. So it was going to be, but we spent about $1,100 on the hotel room, because we went Wednesday night and stayed through to Sunday. So yeah. So that's going to be your biggest expense. As for meals, Indianapolis is fairly cheap depending on where you're coming from, but it's not as cheap as it used to be. you're gonna spend, like, for breakfast, you're probably gonna, if you eat 3 meals a day, and I do because I try to watch my diet and the whole diabetes thing and trying to be healthy. So I found I was spending about $20 a day for breakfast, about $10 to $15 a day for lunch, and $20 to $30 for dinner. And I don't drink. So generally about $20. There are ways to do it cheaper. You could probably cut your meal expenses in half. So what is that? 20, 40, 50. So say anywhere between $30 and $50 a day is what you're going to spend on food. Mad Adventure is saying that the Gen Con bill was going to be about $2,000. I assume you're including travel in there, because I'm getting my trip up to about $1,300. But yeah, no, it is an expensive convention to go to. That's the thing. There's no line. Matt the Warbo says, okay, I'm suddenly less interested. Dang, it is expensive. There's no way around that. And obviously, if you have to travel from somewhere, like when I used to fly in from New York, I was dropping $500 on the round trip plane ticket. So at that point, yeah, I was looking at $2,000 a year to go to Gen Con. Now that I'm in Chicago and I'm a 3-hour drive away, it's obviously a lot easier for me to get to Gen Con. So the biggest expense then becomes the hotel. And, like I said, you're going to be looking at, if you go in Thursday morning, so that you're not staying Wednesday, so you stay Thursday, Friday, Saturday, that's 3 days. 3 times 150. Probably the cheapest you could do the hotel is $300, $450. So around $500 you're going to drop on the hotel if you try to do it fairly inexpensively. If you try to do it like me and you stay at like a really good hotel and this is your one vacation for the year, because that's what this is. This is my one vacation for the year is Gen Con. So that's $2,000. I guess about $1,500. And then the rest is what you spend on loot at the convention. But that's why, like I said, to cut your hotel bill from $230 a night or $250 a night down to $150 a night, it's kind of worth $5 per cab trip to stay away from the convention center and shuttle back and forth. Tabbertson is saying, is Gen Con a 24-hour con, or is there only official stuff going on during certain hours? Okay, that's actually a really interesting question. Gen Con is like no other convention in the world, as in that the official con stuff is not the only stuff that goes on. So a lot of the official con stuff stops at, like the exhibit hall closes at 6. They generally tend to run events later. There's a lot of events in the evening. There's dances and mixers and socials and stuff that go till 11 or midnight. Some of the organized play shit goes even longer. Like Magic the Gathering, you can literally play Magic the Gathering or Pathfinder Society for 24 hours straight through 3 or 4 days if you want to. That stuff runs endlessly. But what that doesn't take into consideration is the fact that every bar and every restaurant within walking distance of the convention, and that's a long bit of walking distance, completely reorients itself for the con. They are expecting con-goers. They are extremely friendly to con-goers. Every restaurant redoes its menu so that you can buy like the winter is coming burger or the one onion ring plate or whatever. They all do this bullshit. They all have special cocktails for it. All of the hotels keep conference rooms open with huge amounts of tables for anyone who wants to do open gaming. So, and everybody is active pretty much for the whole convention. So if you wanted to not sleep and be immersed in nerdy shit for 24 hours straight, 3 days, 4 days straight, you absolutely can. I myself, in the past, I've run games right up until like 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning, and then you go to sleep for 3 hours, and then you wake up and you do it all again. So in that respect, yes, absolutely. Gen Con is a 24-hour convention. You walk into any bar, like the hotel bar. One of my favorite things is to go down to the hotel lobby bar if you can find a table and just bring some card games and sit around and let them keep bringing you drinks while you play, Magic the Gathering or Flux or whatever it is you want. And they don't give a shit. Everybody is playing games there, and you can walk through every hotel lobby and all the open tables, any table space, and there's a lot of table space, is covered by people playing games. So it never ever stops. Gen Con is absolutely the most fantastic convention experience. So there's that. Okay. Anything else? Any last questions? I've been going for about an hour and 46. My limit is usually 2 hours. So if there's any last questions, I will go ahead and take them now. Otherwise, I'm going to shut it down and call it a video. So anybody got anything left they want to add? Trying to think of other funny stories, but I mean, there was a lot of things that came up, and like I said, there was a couple of things that I really can't talk about just yet, but I will talk about them in the future. And I did get to have some very interesting conversations. I actually accidentally met the marketing director of Lone Wolf Studios, or Lone Wolf, whatever they call themselves. They're the folks who do Hero Lab, and they were showing off their new DMing product about the DMing product, Realmworks. Ali RPG is saying, tell the story about Patrick Rothfuss. I'm not sure that that's really that interesting of a story for tonight. I'm going to save that for another time. Yeah. Earl Richie says, thanks for doing this for us. Yeah, no problem. I got nothing better going on. I have actually, one of the things I do want to do, because people have been asking me for more video content, and I'm sort of, as much as I enjoy the video game streaming, and I will still do occasional video game streams, I really do want to focus more on producing video content. As soon as I decided that, okay, I have to re-record these seminars for the internet and put them on YouTube, I realized that there's actually a lot of possibilities for me to create video content, and the only way I'm going to get better at doing it is just by doing it, and it doesn't all have to be streamed, too. Imperial Star Destroyer, which do you prefer, Hero Lab or Playbook? Currently, I prefer Hero Lab, because it is more fully functional for more different games. However, if you are playing Pathfinder, Playbook is the thing to go with. It is far more intuitive and streamlined. It's absolutely a fantastic app. So if you're doing Pathfinder, go with Playbook. If you're doing anything else, go with Hero Lab. The other problem with Hero Lab is it's got kind of a high price point, because you got to pay separately for a module for each game that you want to run, and if it has add-ons you want to use, you generally have to pay for those as well. So it can become very cost prohibitive to use Hero Lab with Pathfinder anyway. So I would say Pathfinder, go Playbook. Anything else, go Hero Lab. Tabertson, gonna do any more mapping? I would like to. Like I said, there is some technical issue with me getting a good capture on the tiny map, but I would do more mapping in general. If people wanted to see like a more generic how to start a map from the beginning kind of a thing, or overland mapping. So, okay, so here's the thing. I would like to produce more video content in general. So if people tell me what sort of video content they want to see, I will probably produce more of that. Do you want to see me interview people, talk to people? I would do that. Do you want to see me talk about games or answer questions or that sort of thing? I will do that. Tell me what you want to see, and that will help guide me to what video content you guys want to see. And I know somebody at some point is going to throw out, do an actual play, and God, I hate doing actual plays. I mean, it's going to happen eventually. It's going to have to, but I'm just going to keep putting it off as long as I can. I just have no desire. Yeah, Mad Adventure saying definitely some mapping 101, 201, etc. Sure, I would do some simple mapping. I would like maybe a simple overland map. Just something to get started with. You know, but the thing is, my maps, the maps I draw are kind of amateurish. I mean, they're all hand-drawn maps. They're just for home use. I'm no professional by any stretch. You know, I'm no Schley. I'm not even like a Stephen Joy at this point. But I can throw together a map that is useful for your home game. All right. So, all right. Any last questions? Going once, going twice, 3 times. I'm just trying to see where the stream is based on my facial expression. I also have to get a better backdrop and maybe decorate a little bit. Tabberton was saying I actually meant the big hand-drawn city map, and any of it would be cool. Imperial Star Destroyers, I like the idea of more structured video or a video game analysis where you're not constantly interrupted by the chat or connection issues. Well, yeah, that's the internet. You know, I like streams because there's the interactive element, so if I run out of things to say, there's always some content that generates itself to fall back on, because I can always start responding to the chat. And my number one fear in any stream is dead air. You know. Mad Adventure is saying, now there's an idea. Mappers mapping the same thing in their own style. Yeah, that would be cool. Maybe somebody should get on that. If only there was someone who had like a website that was like a network of gaming resources that they could maybe gather 3 or 4 different mappers to do that kind of a thing. Ali RPG says, I know someone who has a professional backdrop and a frame. Let me know who that is. Send me a message and I'll see what they want. That would actually be kind of helpful. Infobro was saying, do you ever create non-map visual aids for your games? Okay, I really don't want this to degenerate into an Ask Angry. I kind of wanted to keep this focused on GenCon, and but yeah, I do. Not as often. I'm not an artist by any stretch. I draw pretty decent maps. They're not the best, but they're usable. As far as the rest of my artwork, it does kind of suck. You know, I'm a stick figure guy, so as far as drawing stuff, other visual aids, not really. I mean, you know, we all do the handwritten letters and shit like that, but beyond that, no, I don't really do much for visual aids that aren't maps. Alright, and with that, I'm going to call it a night here. So thanks for hanging out with my post-GenCon debrief. And like I said, if you guys have any ideas for other video content, hit me up on the Twitters. I absolutely love... I enjoy doing video content. If I can do it live, I do like that better because I like the interactive element to it. But also pre-recording and editing is kind of a drag, and I'm not exactly swimming in time right now, as you can probably guess. I have a lot to catch up on this week. The stupid 2 weeks of Gen Con and basically all of the chaos of my life in general, because life never lets up on me. Now, by the way, my apartment building is being sold, so I have to worry about that too. But yeah, so all of that in general has left me very behind on some projects, including some stuff that I owe the Mad Adventurer, who is probably going to kick my ass at some point, because now we're going on 3 weeks without content there, and he's going to be pretty pissed off, and I don't blame him. But I got to get back on track there, especially because like I said, there's some stuff I got to talk about with some people.